Good evening and welcome to Northbeat. I'm Shannon Scott. We begin tonight in the Northwest Territories, where conflict within the Gwich'in Tribal Council continues. Over a month ago, a Supreme Court judge ruled Frederick Blake Jr. was the duly elected Grand Chief. Since then, there has been a battle between Gwich'in leaders on when he can start the job, and it shows no signs of slowing down. As Sarah Krymolowski reports, two local Gwich'in leaders have now launched legal action against Blake.
Two communities that make up part of the Gwich'in Tribal Council are taking the new Grand Chief to court. That's what we learned from these court documents. The Gwich'in Tribal Council represents the Northwest Territories' four Gwich'in communities: Inuvik, Aklavik, Fort McPherson, and Sigachik. Two directors from each community sit on the board along with the Grand Chief. But now, leaders in Inuvik and Aklavik are taking some of their fellow board members to court, including the current Grand Chief, Frederick Blake Jr. Inuvik and Aklavik leaders are arguing that the board meeting where Blake was confirmed as Grand Chief was illegal. They're calling it a hostile takeover of the Tribal Council. That board meeting took place earlier this month, with only board members from Fort McPherson and Sigachik present. The plaintiffs say that Blake was not yet officially sworn in as Grand Chief when he called the meeting, and they say he didn't give them a formal notice it was happening. They also say that a substitute illegally voted on behalf of a sick board member. And finally, they say that some motions passed were against the Gwich'in Tribal Council's own bylaws. For example, the CEO was abruptly fired, the board overseeing the Tribal Council's business arm was dissolved, and Blake was awarded back pay for the 4 months before he was confirmed as Grand Chief. A judge will hear the case on March 7th. Sarah Krymolowski, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Nunavut RCMPs they say they found no criminal wrongdoing in the deaths of two youth at the Naya Isabel group home. The group home, located in Chesterfield Inlet, is now closed. It cared for children and adults under the age of 40 with specialized medical needs. In 2024, Nunavut's Minister of Family Services said 3 people were hospitalized as a result of critical incidents at the care home. The Nunavut Coroner's Office later confirmed a 12-year-old died on January 6th of last year in Nunavut, and a 19-year-old died in October 2023 outside the territory. The home was operated by the Pimasilvik Corporation under contract with the territory's Department of Family Services. The contract wasn't renewed when it expired last March. 8 charges against a former Yellowknife City councillor have now been stayed. He had been facing 14 charges. Last month, a jury found Robin Williams not guilty of 6 charges of assault and sexual assault. It wasn't able to reach a unanimous verdict on the other 8. This morning, the Crown prosecutor stayed those remaining charges. Williams, reached by phone, says the case has been devastating for his life. New public housing units in Betchakon, Northwest Territories are set to welcome tenants next month. The units are located in 3 duplexes. And although they're a welcome addition to the community, some leaders say they still need more. The CBC's Luke Carroll got a tour of the new units and has that story.
Betchakon has a long public housing wait list, but that wait list is about to get a little bit shorter. That's thanks to 3 new buildings that are expected to house tenants within the next month or so. The public housing units will go to people who are at the top of the waiting list, a list that is determined through a points-based system on each individual situation, meaning someone who's more in need of housing may jump ahead of someone who's been on the list for longer. Lillian Erasmus is the housing manager in Betchakon. She says there could be as many as 160 to 180 people on the public housing waiting list.
It's just too much of a waiting list for these people, and they're stuck living with their families, so the more the better.
Jane Whalen Armstrong is the MLA for the region.
Right now, we're in crisis. We need more houses, even not just in Betchakon, but there's in Wati, Gamity, and Wigwiti as well. Even though they're small community, but they do need housing too as well.
But Whalen Armstrong says she is happy with these units. 2 of them are bachelor suites for single occupancy or for couples. 2 are multi-bedroom units that will go to families. Then 2 two-bedroom units will go to seniors. Lucy Kuptana is the NWT housing minister.
Well, we have a collaborative agreement with the Clecho, and Housing reaches out anytime there's development in the Clecho region. We reach out and see if there's any opportunities to partner.
Minister Kuptana says she knows that these units are not enough to address the massive housing issues that are facing Betchakal. But she says her department will continue to do what they can to address the needs of Betchakal and the rest of the territory. Luke Carroll, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Well, it's tax season, and for the city of Yellowknife, that means tax auctions too. That's when the city can sell properties, commercial or residential, where the property taxes haven't been paid for 2 years in a row. Most of the taxes owed this year, though, are coming from one leasing company. Jocelyn Chappelle has those details.
Range Lake Developments has 4 downtown buildings on the city's tax auction list. Those 4 buildings have been on the list for unpaid taxes since they were bought in 2021. Now, the tax arrears for them total over $100,000. That's over half of the town's total unpaid property taxes. Rob Burton is a developer and a city councillor. He says commercial properties make up a large portion of the city's tax base.
It's disproportionately impactful to our budget if you have commercial properties not paying what they should.
Mamouche Faisa is a tenant and business owner in one of Range Lake Development's buildings. Faisa says a few months ago the company asked if he wanted to buy the building for $550,000. He says he declined because the price wasn't worth it. Faisa added that it can be difficult to get help from the property manager. Last Monday, the building's pipes froze and he's been getting excuses since.
I bother him like every single day. Say that I'll send later, I'll send today, I'll send today. Still now, since Monday, no order.
Warburton says to get off the list each year, property owners either pay the tax arrears or go on a payment plan. He added that he doesn't like seeing repeat properties on the list over and over again.
It's a business, so I'm less understanding of why, that being a constant problem.
Warburton added that it's uncommon for a commercial property to still be on the list come auction day. However, he says that due to territorial legislation, he doubts they would sell if they were even on it. He says this is due to assessed value of commercial properties being much higher than the market value. Under the current legislation, the minimum auction price is half a property's assessed value, regardless of if it's commercial or residential. CBC News reached out to Range Lake Developments for comment, but they were not available. Yellowknife City Council will discuss the list at an upcoming meeting. Jocelyn Chappelle, CBC News, Yellowknife.
A path to permanent residency is reopening for immigrants to the Northwest Territories, but only a small number of people will be able to apply this year. The NWT nominee program will accept only 90 new applications in 2025. The announcement came on Friday. For Saeed Salhi, it's bad news. He moved to Yellowknife with his wife over 5 years ago. His daughter was born here, and he wants to stay long term. He says he's been waiting to apply for the nominee program for over 6 months, and that with Friday's announcement, he says he'll likely have to wait another year.
When I want to start to apply for nomination, I hear this news. It's not only me, it's all my family. We're feeling like there is no more future here.
Salhi says he will be applying again in 2026. Applications for the NWT nominee program open on Thursday and close a week later. The government of Nunavut has tabled its $3.3 billion budget today, and it's forecasting a record high deficit. How high? An estimated $124 million. It would be the highest in the territory's history. Nunavut's finance minister says the urgent need for infrastructure outweighs his concerns about a deficit.
There's so many things in our territory that are needed, and the projected deficit that we have will not have a long-term negative impact in our government, in the future governments. We've built up enough surpluses over the years, I believe, to begin to tackle some of these deficit situations that we bring forward. But we need the infrastructure, we need these programs, and I believe that this budget is one that will meet a lot of those goals.
Nunavut MLAs will debate the budget and vote on it before the winter session ends on March 11th. Women across Canada have questions about surgeries performed on them years ago after they delivered their babies. The Survivors Circle for Reproductive Justice has launched a national registry to give voice to Indigenous women who had surgeries performed on them without their consent, surgeries that prevented them from having more children. The CBC's Selma Eccles reports.
Claudette Dumont-Smith is a co-chair for the Survivors Circle for Reproductive Justice. She is encouraging women to fill out a confidential national registry application so they can address the trauma of being denied the choice to have more children.
So, they came out of the hospitals, found out maybe years later, that they could never have children again. So this was very detrimental to many of the women, and this went on for many years, and they suffered in silence.
Karen Kupethwaite from Happy Valley Goose Bay is one of the women affected. After giving birth to her second child, she had her fallopian tubes tied. Kupethwaite says she wanted to have a third child, and found out her tubes were not tied, but both fallopian tubes were removed.
The fact that information was withheld, that's an even bigger issue for me, is how can you almost play God with somebody's body and somebody's future and not even feel the need to inform them of something that is so life-changing and life-altering.
Pauktutit Inuit Women of Canada agrees and says all Inuit women have the right to free and informed consent in all health care decisions. Selma Eccles, CBC News, Rankin Inlet.
Forced and coerced sterilization of Indigenous people is still happening. The Survivors Circle for Reproductive Justice has supports available for Indigenous survivors. Join the National Registry and access up to $70,000 in healing support funds for individuals, families, and communities. The deadline to apply is March 31st. If you or someone you know has experienced forced and coerced sterilization, please call 1-877-386-0750 or visit reproductivejusticesurvivors.ca for more information.
The Kanuipita National Inuit Health Survey Team is going to every community in Nunavut, speaking to Inuit about their health and wellness. And every answer will help us as Inuit determine our own priorities for a healthier future. Together, we will answer the question, Kanuipita, how are we? Find out when we're coming to your community. Learn more at qnihs.ca.
Why don't throw in first base at the sun? Put my soul between the bone. Now I'm hungry, now I'm drunk. Now I'm running like a flaming pig. Scraping off the attitude. Old man eating all my food. Don't be kind, don't be rude. Just shake your boots and let it all get loose.
You are finally here.
Come on! Just talk to me.
Woo!
All you have to do is look.
Nothing can stand in your way. Are you still nervous?
No, not anymore.
If alcohol builds a wall around you, know this. We're here to help if you want us to. It's never too early or too late to ask for help with a drinking problem. Alcoholics Anonymous. There is a way out.
We're a little more than 1 week away from the expected start of Donald Trump's 25% tariffs on Canadian goods. Those tariffs were originally expected to start earlier this month, but were put off until March 4th. And that date is quickly approaching. If they go into effect, the tariffs could have a punishing impact on Canada's economy. For more on what it could mean for the mining industry here in the North, we've reached Lisa Riley. She's the CEO of Vital Metals. That company operates the Nechalacho mine east of Yellowknife. Lisa's in Toronto today. Lisa, thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much for having me.
I'm curious, in light of these pending possible tariffs, what's the mood like in your industry right now?
I think to represent my industry, I would say there's lots of concern about incremental costs on many things that come from the United States. But I think from from our industry, I tend to personally be somebody who focuses on the cup is half full. And so the way we are facing it is trying to bond together with other industry participants in the rare earth space, which is where our commodity sits, in order to flush out a Canadian-only supply chain for rare earths. And so we're in conversations with other industry partners to create a collaborative effort to provide a product that would allow us to be more competitive versus our peers in the United States.
What would that look like, being a Canadian, wholly Canadian rare earth conglomerate, I guess?
Well, there are several advancing projects, I'll say, some in varying degrees. We're about to put our scoping study out at Vital Metals for the Nechalacho upper zone. And the Defense Metals, which has a project in British Columbia, they have just put out their scoping study. Appia Resources has a project in northern Saskatchewan, and Commerce has a project in northern Quebec. So at the end of the day, we would have a collaborative effort. This is all hypothetical at the moment, but that's what we're trying to put together here with different elements of the government and so on and so forth, in order to take this to another level with Indigenous ownership in the processing of rare earths in Canada.
I mean, we're already hearing about how the auto industry, for example, is feeling some preemptive effects from these looming tariffs. Are you seeing that for your company and in the mining industry? Are things slowing down kind of in light of a possible tariff?
No, we are definitely not seeing that. What we're seeing actually is very much an increase in demand, funnily enough, from the United States for rare earths, where they don't even care what the tariff is, because their bigger concern is that the Chinese are going to shut down the sale into the United States of rare earths. And therefore, that's actually driving further demand for our product, in particular rare earths produced outside of China, and in our case, Canada as their neighbor. The biggest issue for my peers in the mining industry, because we've had some calls to discuss the impact in the north, et cetera, is trying to put a pin on capital costs for projects. I think that's the biggest impact in the mining industry at the moment, is how do you estimate how much it's going to cost you to build something over the next 12, 18, 24 months when you're bringing stuff in from the United States.
I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about this conglomerate, this group of Canadian companies you're putting together. Is it feasible to have kind of a Canadian, I guess, do we have enough rare earths here? And is it economically feasible to have a Canadian rare earth conglomerate to present to a global market?
I think absolutely it is very much feasible. We have we have 4 substantially large projects in the consortium that we're talking about. Ours and Commerce are virtually the same size, and Defense, which is more advanced but is a smaller, for the moment, a smaller resource, and Alsis Lake, which is also a smaller resource, but they have lots of work to do to bring their project and make it bigger. Do I think that those are reasonably large? Yes. The Canadian Nechalacho's project is the 8th largest project right now outside of China, so in the world. So just to give you a bit of an idea, and Commerce is a similar size. So there's definitely room for us to play, and it's one of the many critical minerals where Canada has a driving position potentially for moving things forward.
So a significant stake, especially here in the Northwest Territories.
Yes.
As you face this uncertainty, what would you like to see the territorial government here in the NWT now doing to support projects like yours?
From my point of view, I think that the most relevant role the government can play is helping us to advance the infrastructure required to moving our projects forward. Not that I'm suggesting that the territorial government would fund that solely, but that they would help us to move those projects forward and to help us get some industry, public-private partnerships. From my point of view, the infrastructure should ideally be owned by the First Nations and by the Indigenous. And so I think that the issue would be one where the Northwest Territories government and the federal government take a position to help us as industry make that happen.
What's the biggest piece of infrastructure you need right now?
Barging and rail. We need barging, a bigger barging footprint than MTS, which is owned by the government of the Northwest Territories, and we need the rail to come back up to Hay River. So that last footprint from Enterprise to Hay River is not functional. CN has said that they don't want to activate that, and we need to have that brought back on. It's a difference between projects going forward and projects not going forward to have that infrastructure.
And can you just remind us, when do you expect to start producing out of Nicholacho?
In an ideal scenario, we would be hoping to produce in 2028. And in a worst case scenario, we'd be producing in 2030.
Is there anything else about these pending tariffs or a trade war between Canada and the United States that you think is important and is impacting your company and your industry right now that we haven't talked about?
The only thing that I think is relevant is that the federal government understands that they are looking for levers in order to be able to have a position of strength vis-a-vis negotiating with the United States. And some of these critical minerals are absolutely essential levers with that negotiation. So giving us a stronger position vis-a-vis negotiations with the United States. And I think the federal government certainly realizes that. The territorial government absolutely realizes that. And so we just need to bond together and collaborate and come up with a solution that is a Canada-only solution without looking for funding or strength from the United States.
Do you feel confident that that can happen?
I do.
All right, Lisa, we're going to leave that there. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
A Yukon placer miner says he might have to look for other work thanks to a bureaucratic backlog delaying his license renewal. Placer mining involves mining stream bed deposits for minerals. Riley Gibson co-owns a placer mining company in Duncan Creek, Yukon. His 10-year permit is almost up, so he says he filed for renewal last April with the Yukon's assessment board. He was expecting to wait 8 to 10 months. But now, 11 months have passed, and he's running out of time to get approved and get a water license.
There's very little we could do on site. We can't operate any machinery. We can't do any reclamation. We can't maintain any diversions of Duncan Creek we've done. These things need to be monitored and need to be watched. Like, we can't even stay the night out there on site. Like I said, we can't do anything if we don't get this decision document and then go to the ensuing phase, which is the water board.
The assessment board tells CBC it's experiencing a backlog and has been since last spring. For the first time, the Canadian Armed Forces is working with Yukon's Carcross-Tagish First Nation land guardians. The land guardians are acting as guides and providing traditional knowledge to the Army as it runs drills in the Yukon wilderness. And as Katrin Pilkington reports, it's set to be an ongoing collaboration.
For a week, members of the Canadian Armed Forces and the Japan Ground Self-Defense Force were on the land. Guided by Carcross-Tagish First Nation land guardians, soldiers practiced enemy encounters and attack sequences in the mountains, learned how to operate snowmobiles, and coped with the challenges of snow and sub-zero temperatures. On Saturday at the Carcross-Tagish First Nation Learning Centre, members and armed forces gathered for a closing ceremony, where members reflected on the partnership between the First Nation and the military.
It was amazing. So I wasn't sure what to expect. I just knew I was going to be a land guardian guide, and it was a training program. So a lot of folks here were kind of new to snowmobiling and new to their unit. So yeah, it was a great big training session. It was a lot of fun.
This is our first time working with Carcross Land Guardians, and I have to say they're absolutely incredible because they're trappers. They have their own trapping lines here. They've been living off these lands, and their elders, who are also known as knowledge keepers, have been passing down knowledge of this land for thousands and thousands of years, and now we're getting that information as the Arctic Response Company group, and it's invaluable. For example, we did avalanche training last weekend before the soldiers deployed. We had a cultural brief from one of the elders who passed on knowledge on how to survive on land. So if someone were to get lost or separated from the company, he essentially provided us hours of lectures on this is what you can use off the land to survive if you get detached from your rations and from your water and from your tent, and you need to build a shelter because there's an emergency.
Meanwhile, the next Northern military training exercise is already underway. Operation Nanook began Sunday in the Northwest Territories. Katrin Pilkington, CBC News, Carcross.
Now, as Katrin just mentioned, Operation Nanook Nunaliavut is underway in the NWT communities of Inuvik and Tuktoyaktuk. Around 450 Canadian troops are taking part, along with 110 members of allied military forces from the US, Belgium, Sweden, and Norway. The operation takes place in one of the Northern Territories or Northern Labrador every year. Well, before we leave you tonight, we do have a little bit of breaking news to share with you. Canadian North, of course, one of the North's major airlines across the NWT and Nunavik, has just announced that it's being sold. In a news release, it says it signed a binding purchase agreement to be sold to Winnipeg-based Exchange Income Corporation for $205 million. Of course, many of us familiar with Canadian North. The Inuit-owned airline serves destinations across the NWT, Nunavut, and northern Quebec. It has been joint-owned by the Imakivik Corporation and the Inuvialuit Development Corporation since it merged with First Air a number of years ago. This is a developing story, and we'll have more for you on our local news tomorrow. Well, that is our show for tonight. For news anytime, you can always visit our website, cbc.ca/north. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Shannon Scott. Have a great night. We'll talk again tomorrow.
One good scheme deserves another. Stay on him.
I feel we may be in for a challenging few days.
Cheers. Cheers.
12 new records for a penny.
Sounds too good to be true.
It's not a scam. Cancel anytime. It's all in the fine print.
You're going to end up on the hook for a lot more.
You think I'm stupid? I used your name to sign up.
Earth is our collective home that makes us all family. As family, we strive to love and protect each other. Diversity of species is our strength. We are all connected. We survive and thrive together. We celebrate many things this season and make many choices. Taking care of our family should be the easiest. We're in this together.
Alcoholics Anonymous. For more information, visit aa.org